But one could also talk about, obviously, the ways in which documentaries rejuvenated fiction filmmaking, or the other way around. Vertov was not so much influential on Grierson and the British School of Documentary Filmmaking. More influential upon them was Sergei Eisenstein's Balshat Potyomkin, which they saw, which was screened at the Film Society here in London alongside Grierson's Drifters in 1929. And this was seen, so it was that film which uses actors, most of them non-professional, but not all of them, which uses real locations and so forth. It's that film which is more influential in the history of British documentary at that time than any of Vertov's films, which Grierson saw and felt quite disturbed by, because he had really, I think he thought that they were trying to they were doing what he was doing, but possibly better. That's my fear, my thought at least. So to pull it together, though, I think this is a creative relationship. And it's a relationship that's been around since the very beginning of cinema. It's one Vertov didn't find creative. He sort of wanted to grab the tools of fiction, apply them to documentary, and to abolish fiction. But obviously he didn't succeed, and I don't think that's any bad thing.
Okay, thank you. You raised quite a lot of points that I think we're going to come back to again and again and again in this thing, but I just wanted to pick up, first of all, as another good example was this idea that the notion of improvisation and the sort of mistaken belief that one can sort of seize reality or capture reality unawares. But of course, what has always been going on here, and I think that you expressed it in reference to Vertov, is that what's being captured here is the sense of being in the world, it's trying to capture the sense of actually constructing one's own reality, so that the film, if you like, is an analogue of that very complex relationship we all have, in which we are not only observing, but being part of the process of constructing what is out there at the same time. So we're creating our own narratives as well. And these films have some sense that psychological play in which one is, I think, doing the two things. So. But the idea of improvisation, I mean, you think also things like John Cassavetes and so on, are so many fiction films which, of course, are coming out from the other direction, in which you throw the thing sideways and try to capture people through improvisation. You mentioned Flaherty as well, so I think again we should, if we're going to do this properly and sort of do the historical bit, we should come back to these famous films, and I think Sean's going to talk about them.
Yes, thank you. Well, broadly speaking, I agree with what Jeremy said, that there's a tension. I think of the relationship between fiction and documentaries a bit like a Necker cube, which I don't know if any of you see that. It's a diagram of a cube. I'm sure you've all seen them, where that will be the front, then you look at it again, and it's suddenly the back. It's sort of switched. I think that sums up this tension. It's one way of representing it. I mean, when cinema started, it began with films such as the Lumiere brothers' train arriving at the station, and people went to see it not because it was a documentary, but because it had the novelty of movement. And it was only really when you get to the 20s, when people like Vertov are making films and writing about films, that you have the distinction has become more, quite separate by then. And like Vertov, Robert Flaherty staged things in famously Nanook of the North, his film from 1922, where, I mean, for a start, the guy's real name wasn't Nanook. For those of you who don't know the film, it's about an Inuit man and his family, and he staged the hunting scenes and deliberately made the Inuit, Nanook, as he was called in the film, and his people more archaic than their culture actually was. In actual fact, the guy was quite up on cameras and films and helped Flaherty with the script, so he was clearly not, Flaherty was trying to go the noble savage route. In fact, he was a bit more modern than that. But documentary being what it is, quite a very flexible and fluid term. The other end of the spectrum would be somebody like Godard, who famously had his Ziga Vertov period in the late 60s. Godard said of fiction films that they were essentially documentaries of the actors. And in one of his films, La Femme Mariée, the subtitle is Fragments of a Film Shot in 1964, as if he's saying, well, this is what Anna Karina, or whoever's in it, looks like playing this part. This is what this is what it's like to tell a story in Paris in 1964 by somebody who's thinking about films. Godard always saw himself as a critic who just happened to be a filmmaker as well. So between the two, Flatty and Godard, you've also got, I'm just thinking of fictional filmmakers who have quite a documentary-esque feel. Cassavetes has been mentioned, also Lodge Kerrigan, his film Keen, following Damian Lewis around New York, has a very sort of life caught off guard feel to it. I don't know how improvised the film actually was. Then you've got a third category, which is still broadly documentary, is the essay film, which was pioneered by people like Marker, Orson Welles, of course, with F for Fake, where he deliberately admits to lying on camera. And then, again, somebody else famous for staging is Werner Herzog, who says that he would gladly tell every line in the book in order to expose one single truth. And he distinguishes between what he calls the truth of accountants, which would be maybe a more sort of Griersonian sociological truth, the sociological function of a film, and what he calls ecstatic truth. And obviously, being a Bavarian mystic and romantic, he's it's like the notion of the sublime, as the philosopher Burke expressed it. It's something you just can't really express except in an image. So Herzog's striving after that, but he does stage things. There's a scene in Little Dieter Needs to Fly where Dieter Dengler is shown opening and closing his front door and car door, and in reality he didn't have that obsessive compulsive tendency to keep opening doors, but Herzog thought, well, this guy's been held by the Viet Cong for however many months in the jungle, and surely it's a good symbol of somebody who's been released and enjoying their freedom, that they can just open doors and leave rooms. And Dieter Dengler was quite happy to do that because he understood where Herzog was coming from, but it is made up, it's fiction. But again, documentary can encompass that because of its inherent fluidity. There's no, declaration of independence, as it were, that says this is what you must do, 10 Commandments or what have you.